Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to 2023. Happy Three Kings Day if you're listening to this live. Side note, Puerto Rican Christmas, basically. um, but here we are, continuing basically, topic of because it is New Year's, talking about changes that people really want to make. And, right before New Year's, we talked about New Year's resolutions. That's always a hot topic in like just around this time frame. And since we're both in the professional spaces of helping people make changes, we really thought that it'd be a great topic today to talk about helping people break changes down to the most manageable steps, which is really just what is that next step. And that's a place that so many people struggle with in just making decisions and acting on that point. Whether it's because they get overwhelmed, they just don't know what to do next, etc. So really, like, one of the key things, like, you yourself listening to this, or people who are trying to make those changes, whether for New Year's or just anytime, always, is really thinking about what is the easiest, most successful way that you can make that change. So I'm going to let JP talk about it a little bit. And side note, I'm going to get more coffee real quick.
So one of the things that really challenges people when it comes to making changes, especially useful changes, is that a lot of people try and take on too much. And the sad thing is that it's really kind of hard to spot how much is too much because we, especially in American culture, are in love with overworking ourselves. And so we will have a tendency to try and take on too many changes all at once. So almost always, whenever I'm working with somebody on any kind of habit change, no matter how important it is, I always start looking with them for one thing they can change that's going to get them the biggest benefit.
Mhm.
So, matter of fact, unprompted, a friend was telling me something he's doing. He's doing the one of the traditional New Year's resolutions of eat better, lose weight, and without knowing that this is the advice I would have given him, he is boiling it down to a single change. He told me he's just cutting out fast food takeout.
It's
That's
awesome.
the only thing. And the reason that's brilliant is because, as you might have heard me say on this show a time or two before, habits are not single habits. Habits stack on top of each other. Everything you do is made up of other micro habits. So I'm going to dissect that one for a second as an example.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so he, let's say he does cut out successfully fast food takeout. Let's imagine what that looks like because that's probably somebody who was on their way from work or on their way from whatever after work activity to home. Oh, well, okay, I don't have time to fix stuff, so I'm gonna eliminate fast food takeout. Well, now there's a time rebudgeting that has to happen because instead of taking 5 minutes to grab a double cheeseburger at McDonald's, now he has to create something in his home, either at the time he gets home or he has to create it beforehand so he can pull it out of the fridge and eat it. So there's a massive time budgeting habit that has to morph around that. Then, along with that, there's some type of preparatory habit, whether it's what he buys at the store or whether it's like what kind of food he prepares beforehand or at that time. There's a number of preparation habits that have to change and morph around that. Happily, the money change will be positive because, in theory, you usually spend less money when you stop with takeout. So that habit will be a little more positive. But there's a half a dozen things just around that single thing of eliminating fast food takeout. Now, if a person does what people usually do and try and do a lot of different habits all at once,
Mhm.
well, suddenly they're wrangling 4 dozen, 5 dozen habits. So that's exactly the thing that kills people when they try and make a lot of these big New Year's resolutions.
Yeah. And like, how many people would you say out there, can physically juggle like a clown or a performer? There are not many. There are not many.
I mean, 20% of the population, if we do the regular three ball thing, like
I,
maybe.
I'm in the 80 then because I can't even come close. And people think it's like most people think of that inherently. They're like, oh, like that, like I don't know how to do that. But we somehow think that trying to juggle basically habit changes and trying to make a lot of changes, whether it is to diet or different behaviors, is somehow different because it's in our head. It's like, what can we like? Oh, all we need to do is do these 18 things better or all at once. But really, it's just as difficult, if not more so, because we cannot concentrate on more than one thing at a time. And until we start developing like easier patterns, like more automatic routines, we can't just make the like again, it's thinking of too many things at once is super hard to do. It's just kind of it's against the way our brains are wired. Again, it's against that easy human nature. And then like you were talking about, we're so pushed to do more, do more, do more to that like hustle mentality. It's what that also has made us very sensitive to failure. So if we do try to do 17, like if we try to change 17 things at once, like using fitness as that example, you try to meal prep, you try to decide to drink a gallon of water a day, you decide you're not going to have any more fast food, you get like no more candy, you're going to have 32 grams of fiber every day, like whatever it happens to be. If we were to actually do, say, like 90% of those things, like, say, I'll just use 15 again, try to make 15 changes. If you do 13 of them actually pretty well, that is crazy good. But the way we're wired to think about these things is that we didn't do those two. We set it out as a plan. It's like, man, like I just can't do this. I'm failing. And then so
But
often it also makes us stop or go backwards.
and the sad thing is that there's a double bind that exists because yes, if you do a bunch of things and you mess up one or two, you're sensitive to the failure. And if you do the thing I'm suggesting, most people are vulnerable to imagining they're not doing enough. And so
Yeah. Yes.
so a
Yes.
lot of people are in like a psychological double bind of okay, I can do too much and fail at pieces of it and feel bad, or I can do the thing that's more likely to work, but imagine that I'm somehow like playing the game wrong, like I'm cheating or something.
Exactly. So, what do you think is a good way that people can like change that perspective, get that shift, or help others understand, and just really finally take the heart and put into action the value of just doing like one step at a time? What is the next thing I can find? Because again, it's one of these things that can sound very. It can be very easy to understand when you're listening to it, but it can be
Mhm.
much harder to take to heart and actually put into action.
So I think the thing I would love if people could really get in touch with is the mythology of like being able to make changes easily because there's a number of people who if you listen to them, follow them online, have some version of a story of like some sort of massive change they made, and they leave some parts out. They leave the slip ups out. Of course, if you're trying to sell a book or something, okay, fine, I get it. Yeah, that's not the you don't necessarily want to tell that part always. But the sad thing is that a lot of people buy into those stories completely without recognizing that the slip ups are left out. So I mean, let me kind of share one of mine. Uh, I know that for me to stay properly hydrated, I really should drink between a gallon and a half and 2 gallons of water a day. That sounds high. I don't know why, but for some reason, I just like seem to operate better off of that. But when I made my New Year's resolution to do that, it is day 6 of January. So far, I haven't managed it once. I'm the guy. I'm the habit change guy. Like I literally have pieces of paper hung up on my wall that I know how to like help people change habits.
Mhm.
And I have not yet figured out how to work that habit into my life. It's day 6 so far. We'll see how long it takes. But the sad thing is, since that part of the story almost never gets told to people, they really believe that it's possible to just like, I don't know, flip a switch or something and like, aha, I've made a change. And then when that doesn't happen, they think they're the ones that are deficient, as opposed to just knowing that the stories they've heard are probably deficient. That's the thing I would love if people knew more
Ooh, I
of.
love that. They think that they're deficient as opposed to the stories they've heard. Ooh, I like that. I'm the same way when it's funny because, like you mentioned, like, you said I'm the habit change guy, and I haven't hit this goal of changing the habit once. Exact same situation for me. I'm the strength and conditioning, the personal trainer guy, and I've been working for honestly like 4 years of getting back into a healthy workout routine that actually sticks. And it's like it just and again, like I haven't been able to figure it out 100%. And part of it for me is because like I kind of fell into the trap or just the situation where earlier in my life, like making big changes all of a sudden um was it like in my wheelhouse. Like I didn't need like it's just for whatever reason when I was 15 years old and I was like, I'm gonna start training martial arts. And for 7 years, I trained like 5 times a day. Like you know, it's like there was no catalyst to created that. But so, but so for basically for all these years since like in that time frame, I said these last few years where I've really struggled with it, it's been really hard to break myself from that story that I could do that before, so I should be able to do it now. Or again, that's just the pattern that I've learned. So I've had to like slowly learn new tools and try new ways of applying changes and getting things that will work with my current situation now and like who I want to be in my routine now.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that's another area where people do exactly that. I used to be able to make this change, now I can't. And there's a deficiency in that story that's hard to spot until I point it out, and then it becomes so blindingly obvious. But when we're younger, most of us can make much more sweeping changes. And what a benefit it is to habit change when you don't have a job
Yep.
and dependents and taxes and plans and goals and crises and whatever the hell else we deal with as adults on a daily basis. Most adults are operating at the absolute outside edge of their abilities every single day.
Yeah, that's a
And
great point.
so, yeah, like I mean, I don't know about you, but I really probably push my boundaries of how much I can do harder than I really should. Uh, and so, how many habit changes can I be expected to make? How many habit changes can you be expected to make?
Yeah.
But the 15-year-old you who had nothing to do but figure out how to like do his homework with the minimum possible effort, probably, and play
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons sometimes. Sure, you can spend 5 hours a day on martial arts.
Exactly, and it was awesome. I'm not gonna pretend it wasn't. It was great. I was thinking the exact same thing at the beginning of this call. So I was 90% positive that's where you were gonna go with that. And, is yeah, like most of us I don't think people realize that, yeah, as we get older, again, we tend to think that when you're younger, thing we don't know as much or it's harder. We almost think we can't do that, like, make those big changes. But like you said, we have less competing with us. But as we get older, especially just simply into adulthood, but even in adulthood itself, our society is set up so that things are going to grow and stack up on us. That's the way it
Mhm.
goes. You go from an entry job and an entry apartment, and maybe you're still getting some help from mom and dad if you're financially lucky in that standpoint, to then getting more of that dependence. Eventually, you build up to more more difficult jobs or more management positions. You're in charge of more results are up to you. You're in charge of more people. Maybe your family grows. You suddenly own property. Those taxes go from that annoying thing you do to, oh my God, this tax bracket sucks. Like all these different things are set up.
And don't forget the 5 minute tasks that turn into 45-minute tasks. I told you about having to call the stupid airline today.
Yeah, exactly. Like things just keep growing because we have more and more and more to do, unless we finally make a commitment to actively simplify that. And that is a choice that we actually have to make, and then decide to do. That most people don't even realize it. Like if you're listening, like those, like your life is not going to suddenly get simpler because you let time pass. Like that's like it's just not going to work that way. Like if you're hoping there's going to be less to do, you're going to have more free time, less things on your mind. just because you're not going to outweight that. Like that's like those are things you have to actively start kind of like working and make decisions to make those changes happen and get to the simplification process.
So let's make some stuff practical here. Because common New Year's resolutions, like we talked about last time, have a tendency to be some version of health related. So if we talk about health related resolutions, we'll end up covering 70 to 90% of New Year's resolutions probably. So let's think through, like, if we were going to identify what is the one thing for a lot of these that if we were going to say distill it down to one habit and really just pound on that one, what's some of the ones that you would think of looking at? Of course, I mentioned my friend who said, okay, no more fast food takeout. That's a pretty good one. What are some ones you'd think of?
Yeah. I mean, your water example is a good one. I would just say make it as like again, make it as simple as possible. This has been my biggest personal evolution, I would say, by the way. At least one of them is going from a guy who has supported the hardcore 100% 180 turn changes to like now just being like, like that's awesome if you can do it, but really try to find just this simplest piece you can change and improve. So water's a big one, but for a lot of people, that might just be like drinking water, period. Like maybe two normal 16-ounce bottles a day. That's like no water, by the way. But for somebody who say, there's a lot of people out there who literally have gone, years drink where almost everything they drink is soft drink.
Coffee, soda,
Yeah, like
yeah.
iced tea or sweet tea. So making a little change like that, like I'd say, like really take, like I think a lot of people can, if you think about it, you can come up with the small changes. If you then keep thinking about it, you can probably find ways to make it even smaller. So it could be that going to the gym, okay, but yeah, don't worry about a workout program per se, especially if you failed at this before. I would say just start going to the gym like once or twice a week. And again, like don't beat yourself up.
And let me tell you the version I recommend to people of that. That they hate it, but the ones who do it, like, actually usually do pretty well. Is I tell them, pick your number of days a week, and the habit is walk into gym.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's the habit. Literally everything else doesn't matter. Go play on the treadmill, mess around with some free weights, literally do anything. It doesn't matter. Walk in, get a drink of water from the water fountain, walk out if that's all you want to do. But that the habit is walk into gym, and that's the actual habit, because even that already has a ton of micro habits around it. First off, like, you got to get off of your program when you're driving home from work. You got to deprogram driving past the gym to your house, and you've got to turn right and get there.
Exactly.
And you've got to program in the time, even if it's only 30 minutes. And you've probably got to take at least a pair of sneakers and maybe a pair of shorts with you. So you got to remember to pack that in the morning. So even just the habit of walking into the gym and doing literally anything has enough micro habits around it that I usually tell people to don't even worry about the workout yet.
And I'm gonna take that and bring up like a specific shift that I think can make this very successful for a lot of people. That is to a degree the extent of what a lot of people sort of do who start on New Year's resolutions. They're like, I'm gonna start working out. I'm gonna get in shape. They go get a gym membership, probably a relatively cheap one because they're like they just want to get started, and then they go in to work out to do fitness. But then they start petering out when they're not sure what to do, and or like that initial motivation wanes. So like side note of that, like motivation can almost hurt in this case because it kind of pushes you to want to do those really big things, rather than like just starting. But part of that's because like going into the gym to work out is a plan without a plan. Just going to the gym and then whatever, like you said, like go to gym, walk inside is a plan. It is actually a better plan because that is your target. You're like, my actionable step is going to the gym. That is what I'm getting better at.
I loved your phrasing there. Do fitness. Like, a lot of people like have that as the plan, and that's a terrible plan. Do fitness.
Exactly. Like, so it seems like your plan is saying to do less, but it's like, no, your plan is saying like, this is your small step, achieve this and start making this like more doable and something to do otherwise. People who want to go to the gym and work out haven't even hit what they figured out to do yet. So it goes back to that, like they almost start feeling like they're failing or they start losing that energy to go. And because they don't have the idea of like, I just need to show up, they eventually start falling off on it.
Hmm. Oh,
Yes.
and good important point, by the way. You brought up something that I won't belabor today, but it bears mentioning. Uh, Lack of motivation is completely meaningless. A lot of
It's
people
yep,
get caught up in like the fact that they're unmotivated, like 3 weeks in means something, means they're making the wrong change, or it means they're not committed, or it means who knows. People make up a lot of stuff about motivation. Uh, so here is the real deal about motivation habit change. It's nice to have, enjoy it while it lasts. It's going to go away, and that means nothing.
yep. I would say if you want to get the most out of motivation, use it to organize your thoughts a little bit and maybe set up that step one of your plan. I would say that's basically it.
You wanted to say get your spreadsheet together. That's really what you wanted to say.
Oh, dude, I get mine all, yeah. So whatever, it's just that. Um, well, go in. I'm actually going to take that segue and go with it. Yeah. So for those people, like some people who like, if this is your mindset, a way to like you can do if you can get yourself to do some of the work up front. So like when you're motivated or whatever, or it doesn't have to be you. Find the work up front. Find the guidelines you want to do. Have somebody help you with it, whatever it is. Um, that can give you a tremendous setup for your next step. Because actually, so like what I did, because for me, I'm looking at I mean, like with my overall fitness goal, but like nutritionally, I was like, okay, let me do something here to like also just improve where I'm at. So I got blood work done a few months ago that I had just glanced at, and that was it. But so when I was getting ready to start, just again, my motivated period, quote unquote, was pick up my blood work and just write out the things that were like not where I wanted them to be. So I took those, and then I were like, okay, each of these things, whether it was, cholesterol, glucose, a liver enzyme, you name it, it's like what what helps these things? It's like, okay, soluble fiber on this one. This one is more of an exercise lifestyle thing. This one might be helped by this food group or avoid this food group, whatever. It was like made these notes. So I had my list of notes based on the blood work. Then I was like, okay, nutrition change. I was like, I'm starting with that one, and that's it. So just like actually your friend, I am starting with I'm starting with three. I'll be honest, but they're three very simple ones.
Here I am saying do one, and
Yeah,
I'm starting with three.
but no, it's like, but they're very simple. I swear. But it's like avoid fried food, um, eat more soluble fiber, and eat mushrooms.
What is soluble I've heard that term, but I actually don't know what that
I
means.
can never remember which is which, to be honest. It's one of the types of like fibers, either soluble or insoluble. I think soluble is the one that your body can actually break down to some degree in digestion. I can't remember. Like generally, foods that are like have it will tell you they're like, hey, we have soluble fiber. Like
Okay.
oatmeal has a lot of soluble fiber, for example.
Okay.
But um, but like it tends to help more with cholesterol, for example, than just fiber,
Got it.
for lack of a better term. But so those are three easy changes. Like for example, the mushroom one seems weird. I already like mushrooms and use them a lot in my cooking. So it's just like, okay, now I'm just gonna like try to eat them, put them in something every day.
It's really simple if you order mushroom powder because you can use it as a flavoring.
Could be, but I mean, like so that
I'm
could
just
be
telling you
another one.
something to look
For
up
me,
because we use it
I
all the time.
probably throw handfuls in there. but again, like so, those are the only things I'm focused on doing, and I gave myself just a out like, okay, try to do this for 2 months, and then I'm gonna as I get closer. do blood work again, and just see how the changes are doing. If things are going well, that's all. I'm just do that. If they're going, if they're improving, and I feel like everything's on point, then I'm going to try to add the next step and make like add one change to that.
So I'm going to say something to the people who listened to the way you do plans and are horrified,
Yes.
because because that is a very regimented, like step by step mathematical formula.
Yeah. That's why I try to tell people, I'm like, for the people whose brain works like this might be good.
Yeah, and see, I do exactly the opposite. I kind of freeform my habits. So basically, here's what's going to happen with my little water habit. Once I get good and notice it happens automatically, I'll revisit and add another one. Like my two-step habit change formula is change a habit. Oh, that's going well. Fine, change another one. That is the two-step formula. So if you hate the mathematical equation clockwork formula, do mine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like in the spirit of this call, like so I started with the list. I think there were 12 or 13 things on my list after the blood work. And like just trying to do 3 out of 13 is a huge step for like me. Like I said, and like I said, this has been years because I would have tried to like 10 years ago me, 15 years ago me would have tried to figure out a diet that had every single one of those things in it and then just stuck with it. So again, so part of that's like that personal evolution talked about earlier in this call was like, okay, like making it simpler, finding it ways to make it simpler, finding it ways. And like out of those, like avoid fried foods is my like that's my one. It's like, okay, like I'm not worried if I eat oatmeal 5 days this week, but miss it the other two. I'm not that worried about it. Same thing with the mushrooms. If I happen to not throw mushrooms into my food, but it's like my avoid fried foods is my real number one right now. I'm just like, okay, just try to do that. And again, like if it doesn't happen in a day, okay, as long as it happens more days than not, and ideally less and less. So
Yep. So yeah, this is the version of you that is less clockwork and mathematical.
yes, I still have spreadsheets. They're still there.
We're going to bury you with those.
Give me my Excel. Like, oh, yeah, man. Like, so one more thing I want to just come back to, I think is a good way to like go into the summary and the practical part. Um, was you mentioned finding that one biggest thing that will make the most impact. I mean, I said that is a huge thing that a lot of people like when they really finally take that to heart and start using it, makes a lot of changes. And then not just we're talking obviously about these changes, but that is a good mentality to have. This is just a good philosophy. Like if you run a business or a department and you can find that like what's that one thing that's going to move the needle better, so really kind of training yourself to think about what is that one thing that can improve X and help me get closer to Y outcome. That's a huge mental shift and just like super powerful tool that people can have. So like just going a little bit deeper on that one, what are some ways people can use to really like figure those out?
So one of the things I like to do, because it seems to point to the one change, is I like to approach a lot of stuff, especially health wise, but sometimes otherwise, as energy management problems. So like somebody I was working with the other day, we were talking about, well, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And I said, well, okay, that's about 77 changes, and that's too many. So if you made one, but that really cleared up a lot of energy for you to be able to make the next one, what's that one? And it ended up being some version of eating better. And so then I said, okay, so still working on energy management. What is the one eating related change that will give you better energy to make more eating related changes? And he drilled down to that doing his breakfast correctly. would be a massive shift in the energy management equation, and that would be able to possibly power a bunch of different changes. And so for that person, it was, eat breakfast and eat it some version of actual food instead of something from the drive-through. But that same question really impacts a lot of people. That's how my water thing came about. I know perfectly well that my energy is way better when I drink a ton of water, and I know that's going to power further changes. So that seems to be a really powerful question for a lot of people, to drill it down to what is that one change you should be making, is just looking at it through an energy management lens instead of a bunch of other different lenses.
Mm. Do you have any tips for people, either themselves or, of course, just people trying to help others in terms of extracting information or thought from them? Like people who just kind of are in that, for whatever, they give that, like, I don't know. Like, either they're not used to thinking about it. They, when you ask them a question like, oh, I don't know what would help. I don't know this. Like, do you have any tips to kind of get people to actually think? And I don't mean in the sense of people who don't want to share. I mean people
Sure.
who seem like they just don't want to actually, like, either think or like know how. Like, sometimes people may just not be used to like actually trying to break down their thoughts.
Yeah, that's a tougher question, because you can't necessarily use what I use, because I happen to be naturally good at spotting patterns. So by the time I even ask that question, I already have several ideas, because I've already spotted quite a number of patterns. And I always shy away from anything where the advice is, oh, just be me, because that's completely non-actionable advice. So if I was going to try and figure out, like, somebody who is more average at pattern spotting and how they would do it, I would usually say, I would probably encourage them to say, to themselves or to someone else, some version of kind of like this conversation. Like, if we shrunk it down to a 45-second blurb, you know, I'm trying to help somebody figure out what's the one change that's going to be helpful. I might distill it down to something like, hey, you know, there's some habits that are just more important than others. If you made one change that made you feel massively better, do you know what it is? Uh, or some other thought-provoking but specific question, because what causes people to fall into the I don't know trap very easily is when questions are too broad. Like, if I look at somebody and said, hey, what New Year's resolution should you make? Way too broad. But if we shrink it down to, what's the one change, if you made it, you would feel so much better about yourself? That shrinks it down to an area that people are usually fairly intimate with, because most people know what they feel bad about themselves for, or what makes them feel bad. And that allows for a potential answer much more easily, because you've shrunk it down to a much more manageable size.
Hmm. That makes sense. And, and I mean, like, I think the art of conversation can be invaluable in that too. So if you can't, like, it might even just come up, but when you're having just a good conversation with somebody, maybe about those topics, like just, good friends, it happens to come up, things you become a little bit more interested in or passionate about, you may be giving tips right then. Like, those might be the ideas you're getting a little bit coming out. Uh, just say things.
Oh, something else just occurred to me too, because here's the major mistake. Like, if you're in somehow in a position where you're talking to somebody about habit change, making sure to help them change a habit they are interested in changing.
Oh, huge. Yes.
Because so many people get caught up in the habit we want them to change, and that really requires massively specialized training. Now you have to, like, be in my profession to assist with that, much more likely. But if you're just trying to help somebody figure out what's the closest thing to that they're actually willing to change, not willing to stop going to McDonald's, fine, but maybe they are willing to, I don't know, stop drinking soda. Well, fine, work on that one. Don't even worry about McDonald's right now.
That's a great way to end it. With people and with messaging, same thing. Like, again, like I keep seeing on Facebook, you should try to do this. It's like, I mean, like, is that something you really want? Because yeah, if you don't really want it, you're just not changing it. I mean, that's just again, that's just human nature. It's just not the way we're wired.
Yeah, no joke.
But, all right, brother. Any finishing points you want to make? I think this is
No,
really
no,
good.
I think that was about perfect. Just stick with your changes, and don't be afraid to make them small if they need to be small for you to sustain them. Because as you gain momentum, you'll be able to do bigger and bigger ones and more ones.
Little steps lead to success. Exactly. So, all right, brother. We'll be back here in a couple of weeks. Hope you guys got some value out of this. As always, feel free to leave us any comments or share it with people you know. See you guys.
Y'all.